What I'm here today to talk about is some waste legislation issues. As you're all aware, waste legislation has increased significantly over the years and is now a key part of any corporate requirement to ensure that, as a company, they're complying with all the waste legislation. And as again, waste has sort of moved and become more technical and we've seen more separation of materials, waste compliance has become more difficult because you're dealing with more companies, you're dealing with different types of waste which require different types of compliance. And for a lot of companies, therefore, it is something that's moved up the corporate hierarchy closer to the board level in terms of ensuring that as a company, compliance is underpinning everything that they do. We've got increasing areas of legislation that cover different parts of waste, and that those responsible for looking after the compliance side within companies have to think about. And therefore this is no longer simply some guy out the back signing a transfer note to say that yes, their waste has been taken away. The person further up the chain, all the way up to board level, has to make sure that behind that everything is covered, and that the potential liabilities that come with that, relating to all these areas of legislation. There's something like 280 pieces of environmental legislation, many of which relate to waste, that people have to know about. So it is becoming an increasingly difficult problem. So what is it that tends to drive companies to ensure that they are compliant with waste legislation? We've already talked about some of these wider sort of corporate issues, but corporations have different priorities, and obviously some corporations are driven by the environmental bent, and ensuring that at the end of the day their company is seen to be as green as possible, not only internally but externally, subject to all the scrutiny you tend to get from lobby groups and things. But you've got then the potential impact on the company if they get a prosecution, not being able to tender for things, being able to be exposed these days much more readily through public registers and things. You've got corporate profiles I mentioned earlier. You've got increasing use of ISO 14001, and most companies now are aiming towards 14001. And this is seen as actually part of the government's strategy to improve corporate enforcement, corporate compliance, by looking to companies to be self-compliant and self-regulating through quality management systems such as 14001. The cynical might say, well, that then will reduce the requirement for the Environment Agency to add enforcement. The government, I'm sure, will say, well, all we're trying to do is up standards.